Hello and welcome to the first episode of Future SCI Chat. We have theme music now. Woo! Anyways, today's episode is on electric cars. What do you guys think of that?
That's a great first topic.
Yeah.
I'm turned up for it.
So I wanted to talk about electric cars because I've been doing a ton of research into buying cars, and I want an electric car. It just seems eminently useful, and you don't have to take them in for maintenance as often. They don't need a bunch of motor oil, and they don't need
all those other things, fluids.
Well, they probably still need some fluids.
Yeah.
But basically the only thing that's bad about them right now is that they're more expensive than gas cars, and there aren't a lot of electric charging stations. So the amazing thing that, to me at least, in the history of electric cars is that they've sort of been, if you think about 3D movies, they've sort of come into vogue at certain points in history, and then they've gone away again because the time wasn't quite right. And then they'll come back in a slightly different variation, and then they'll go away again for whatever reason. And electric cars have been doing the same thing. The electric motor for the electric car was invented in like the 1800s, and it's just been amazingly useful, and like it's really efficient at generating power. It doesn't pollute the environment, all this good stuff. But because it's a little bit more expensive than using gas, natural gas or sort of non-renewable energy sources, people have not taken to using it. And I think that's really a shame because I'm not even really that worried about the environmental side of things. Like, I am worried about it, but that's the least of my personal concerns. I just think that, like, the idea of not having an engine in a car seems amazing. You just have an electric motor that makes almost no sound. That's the dream. I don't know. What do you guys think, Mike? I'm done talking for a while. What do you think about electric cars?
I think I agree with what you're saying. I remember in grade 6 we did a science unit on electric batteries and that kind of thing, and I think electric cars were in the news back then in their mid to late 90s. And yeah, the main hurdle was finding a battery that would last long enough and be light enough and cheap enough. We talked about hydrogen fuel cells and that kind of thing. So I think now they've come to a point where batteries are at least to the point where they're viable to be used in marketed electric vehicles. And I think there's definitely a market for it and a future for it. But I think hybrid cars are a lot more realistic to be marketed and embraced by the public. I don't think pure electric vehicles are at the point yet where they can be. Like you said, they're quite expensive and they have their limitations compared to the combustion engine variety of vehicles.
Mm-hmm. So what about you, Nick? Would you ever consider buying an electric car? If the price was the same, you'd pick electric, right?
I'm almost certain I would. The only drawback is the issue of range, but like on a grander scale, like if you wanted to go on a road trip somewhere, like a really long trip.
Yeah.
We don't have the infrastructure for that currently, like charging stations and things like that. If we did, and I think we will at one point, because I think we just have to figure that out at some point, I would definitely go for it.
Yeah.
Did that make any sense? Because I think I went back and forth, within that monologue.
Well, you gave a couple reasons for it and a couple reasons against it. But, I was looking yesterday, I did a bit of research on the Tesla website, which is the most sort of well-known electric car that's being mass-marketed right now.
Yeah.
And the high-end model can get 400 kilometers range.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll charge back up, I think they said it was like 4 hours. They have supercharger stations, and you can install like a fast charge system in your garage. But basically the whole thing is that unless you're doing like a road trip across a country, you're not going to be driving enough that the range thing is going to be an issue with that kind of thing. The only problem with that is that it's even more expensive than the base model, which is already more expensive than gas cars. But the energy savings on that are going to be incredible. Like electricity is way cheaper than gas in terms of like on a per mile basis. It's not even close. It's just that there's a huge investment up front, and as I've learned on many different fronts, people don't like paying up front if they unless they absolutely like they have the math down, and in the very near future it's going to take over. Like if we're talking about 2-year phone contracts, that's the example I always go to. Nobody pays for a phone up front, even if it's going to cost them less 2 years down the road. People aren't going to pay for a Tesla when it costs $75,000, $80,000 if it's not going to pay off almost immediately. Even though it's like I said, it's good for the environment. It costs you less for the actual fuel itself. So it's kind of disappointing to me that there's all these sort of roadblocks that have always been in the way. As soon as electric cars sort of started taking off a little bit in the early 20th century, there were all these roadblocks, especially on legal basis from gas companies and fuel companies that had these interests in normal gas-powered vehicles. I'm trying to, because I would think that the battery in an electric car is so big that it would be sort of unfeasible to swap it out. Like you wouldn't be able to carry a spare battery to replace the battery, but I sort of see, like with the range issues in a Tesla, couldn't you have like a battery pack, like someone would carry a gas can in the trunk of their car? Couldn't you just carry a spare battery that could get you an extra, say, 50 miles to a charging station?
In my very quick research on the topic on Wikipedia, there are a couple notes there about those kinds of ideas, and I guess just to talk about the environmental impact, because you brought it up just earlier. You still have to look at, it's not based on, it doesn't use gas, so it's zero emissions. You have to look at what's come to be known as the well-to-wheel carbon footprint of electric vehicles, and they've actually found that in parts of Europe where the additional energy demands on charging electric vehicles would be supplied by coal-burning energy, you're actually causing more emissions using electric vehicles than on combustion engines. And even parts of the U.S., it works out to about 30 miles per gallon equivalent carbon emissions using electric vehicles. Again, because of the energy demands. But then you have other places where you get 80 to 100 miles per gallon. So there are benefits, but it's highly dependent on where your energy is coming from and how efficient it can be. And then on the battery pack thing, they're saying that as far as the immediate cost is higher, the long-term cost isn't immediately offset by savings in fuel, but as far as repairs and just the fact that you can reuse batteries and use them as a spare as they get older, so you replace it with a new one once you need that demand, but with the older batteries you can charge them up and use them for those 50-mile, however long bursts of a replacement battery that you might need.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to look here and see how much the batteries weigh. They say that
I don't know. I would look into like the actual size of the battery bank in a Tesla Roadster or something like that versus its range, because I think like I don't know how many batteries you would have to haul to get it to like the next gas station, but it seems like it might be unfeasible at this point anyway.
Right, like I'm picturing a battery pack that would have a certain amount of capacity. They're saying that there are
the equivalent of a jerry can.
Yeah, there are 7,000 individual battery cells in the Tesla that are about 322 kilograms.
Oh, geez.
Which I mean, it's 600 pounds or so.
Yeah. Well, you go back to like the whole the rocket equation, right? And it's like you're spending more energy lugging the juice around than you're getting out of actually using it, right?
Right. And so the part, I mean, obviously, if the energy output of the Tesla is better on than a gas-powered car, like in terms of non-renewable energy sources, obviously right now it's energy-wise it's a bad idea to use electric cars. But the whole idea is that we shouldn't be using coal to get electricity. We should be using wind or
Mhm.
hydroelectric or solar. I mean, that would be the ideal thing, is to be offsetting any carbon emissions that way,
Yeah.
as opposed to just using coal. Because yeah, that in that example, you're sort of screwed either way.
Yeah.
In Ontario, anyway, like I think it would be incredibly feasible, just because we have a comparatively very renewable energy makeup, or sustainable energy makeup if you count nuclear. Like, routinely, nuclear is generating 25 to 30% of our power, and 50% is coming from hydro. So, I mean, I feel like Ontario would be well set up for that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and the other nice thing about Ontario is that all of the population is centered on one belt, where you could have a series of charging stations along the highway and
Yeah.
it'd be fine.
Yeah. Well, and even natural gas is cleaner than coal,
Yeah.
and I think with the advances in drilling and the drive to exploit those resources, I think ideally they'll put in more infrastructure to, especially in Europe, to have those natural gas generating plants as opposed to the coal that they have now.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be interesting to talk about the differences, the advances sort of in coal to natural gas um, to electricity.
I would love to give like my 2 cents right there because I've been reading up on it recently.
Go ahead.
Like in terms of Ontario's coal plants anyway, and how they're really trying to get them all shut down and whatnot. We actually have a coal burning plant up. It's either on Superior or Huron. It's like way up in northern Ontario. It's the Atikokan generating station. They've actually stopped burning coal, and they're working on like a full conversion over to wood. And I think that's hilarious because what else do they have up there but wood to burn?
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that we're still, I mean, not still, but the idea that we're burning anything to get energy, like it's just the least efficient way to do things. You're, the only reason we're burning anything is to generate either heat or momentum, and there are just so many better ways to get energy out of the earth and out of the environment.
It's easy though, like that's why they do it. It's easy so it's cheap.
Right, it's easy, but
The invisible hand, Rob.
it's horrible, and the hand is less invisible now with lobbyists and with all these all like political pressures. It's not an invisible hand because there are subsidies that they can give out and there are laws that they can make. It's
Sure.
it's a lot less invisible than most people would probably think. It's certainly less invisible than I had first thought when I didn't know anything about politics or about lobbying. But there's definitely a lot that we can do as consumers and as citizens that can change the way these kinds of things
Hmm.
work, and
Yeah.
we can opt on an individual basis to pay a little bit more for solar power, as opposed to just sticking to the old way of doing things and possibly like destroying the environment. I can't say for certain. I don't think anyone on Earth can. What's going to happen uh, with climate change and the environment and all that, but we should at least be trying,
Hmm.
as opposed to just sort of sticking with the old ways of doing things until they prove to be completely detrimental to the environment. It at least seems prudent to keep innovating and trying solar power, trying to use hydroelectric and wind power. It just seems irresponsible not to do that and just sort of stick with what we had that worked.
So Rob, what do you think the government needs to do to motivate the citizens of our planet to to buy into that kind of thing. So I guess particularly pertaining to electric vehicles, short of Matt Inman becoming president and just being funny and encouraging people to buy them.
Right, of course. And he would too. Um, so I don't think it's a matter necessarily of the government giving us incentives to buy electric cars or to use renewable energy, as much as it is a matter of the government not subsidizing the old ways of doing things, or at least reducing those subsidies, because they have it really easy compared to the incumbent. And not to say that it doesn't happen, because there are subsidies for electric or for renewable energy use. And like if you install, I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but if you install solar panels, you get like part of that subsidized by the government.
You do. You get an increased feed-in tariff rate.
Yeah, and there are subsidies in Ontario for buying a Tesla. You get $8,500 off from the Ontario government. So these kinds of things are happening, and I think it's just a matter of time until it catches on. It seems like I'll go back to the 3D example. It seems like 3D really has hit its stride now, and this current implementation of it is going to keep going for longer than any of the other ones have, until it does become sort of mainstream technology. I think electric cars are sort of the same thing. They're starting to come into it's starting to get to the point now that people are realizing that this actually is what's going to be the way of doing things soon.
I think the best solution I've heard to things like that is the one outlined in NPR's Planet Money, in which you create a carbon tax that actually reflects the true cost of carbon.
Sure.
But like in their plan, it ends up costing almost nothing, like according to economists anyway, because what you do is you take the money from the carbon tax and then you use it to reduce income tax for people. So, like, even though the net is almost zero, because like for the average person, the net loss gain would be zero, you still have that incentive to not pay for the extra carbon being used.
Right.
So, like, especially people in cities who tend to use a lot less carbon, like, they would be much further ahead for it. But, like, I think it's only through actually charging the true cost of things that will incentivize moving to other sources of fuel and power.
Right. To go back to my other favorite analogy of cell phones, what you're saying now reminds me of usage-based billing for phones, and like obviously the current system is broken, and the true cost of things is actually generally a lot cheaper than we think, just in terms of corporations trying to take profits. Like we, as the average consumer, have no idea what gas actually costs gas companies. We just sort of trust that, oh, yep, it's always going up. And meanwhile, they're sitting there forecasting how much they're going to be able to extract, how much they're going to be able to import, and they're setting prices to make money, but really we have no idea what their profit margins are. It's hard to know, because they're getting, like, for them, now that they have the technology and they found these natural gas deposits, it's cheap for them to get it out of the earth.
Yeah.
And to
Well, I can kind of comment on that, because I've, being in the industry, you kind of hear a bit about profitability, and you see that response and how much they're drilling and that kind of thing. Natural gas, actually, right now, I think to be profitable, they need to be at about $3 per trillion cubic feet, and I think it's just over that right now. A lot of companies who are vertically integrated, they're able to drill even when it's lower than that, and they can just kind of hold it and sell it when it's higher, or use it for their own purposes. But from a crude oil standpoint, I think they're profitable between $30 to $50 per barrel.
Okay.
And they're at just over 100 right now. So you can kind of imagine. I think, and again, it depends on their procedures, but I think even sometimes as high as 60 or 70, they're profitable. But either way, they're making anywhere from 30 to 50% profit on the price of oil that it is right now.
Yeah. And I don't know, but I feel like they would have to be getting government subsidies too to do this kind
Yeah.
of
Well, they get royalties for the mineral rights they hold. So the
right.
government is paying them to produce the resources that are in the province. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Which, I mean, it seems like a conflict there just because of what we know, and like with the Kyoto Protocol trying to go through and basically failing in every possible way it could have. Um, like the government, it seems to me, should be, if they're actually serious about like attacking climate change and trying to minimize our carbon use, is to stop subsidizing the old ways of
Yeah.
doing things and to focus on improving the new ways. And not to say they haven't been doing that, but to especially the stopping subsidizing the old ways part. Everybody sort of gets into a pattern of complacency and stops trying to innovate and come up with new technologies, and they just do what they've been doing. And then if someone tries to take that away from them, they jealously like guard it as much as they can and try to stick with the way they've been doing things. That just doesn't seem like a very productive way to approach it to me.
Yeah. Well, how is a province like Alberta supposed to generate revenue and invest in their infrastructure and schools and hospitals if they're not getting those revenues from their resources? And plus, we're sending money over to you guys too, so you can't be complaining about that.
You're not sending it to us because we are also a half province.
Not as much as Alberta, but
We together are subsidizing the rest of Canada.
Yeah.
Just,
sure, in our own ways.
just hold up there.
Yeah, you're talking to the wrong group.
No, I don't. I think Ontario's the only other exception, but yeah.
We've been a have province since the inception of the program, with the exception of one quarter, like one fiscal quarter.
Yeah.
But that being said, this is Canada, and it's not a group of provinces; it's a country. So there's like
Except for Quebec.
yeah, whatever. Alberta.
Well, they're a nation within a nation, as I
Exactly,
understand
yeah.
it.
I mean, by that logic, we're all nations within nations, or within a nation. But I mean, Alberta happens to have these natural resources. It doesn't mean that it's theirs, and they get to jealously guard.
It actually does. That is actually
yeah,
what
that
it
is.
means.
I understand that people think that, but I don't think it's necessarily true. I would strongly argue. I came here. Does that mean that I now lose out on that?
Yes.
Yep.
So why doesn't everyone just move to Alberta?
They are.
You don't get it. You go there. It doesn't make any sense. If you're a Canadian citizen, you.
In all seriousness, though,
Yeah.
it's going to be a long process. But if we we are addicted to oil currently as at least a mobile energy source for cars and stuff like that. Like, if you just stopped the oil supply, like, tomorrow, you would have, like, a 1970s style OPEC crisis on your hands.
Right, but I'm not saying stop it. I'm saying slow it down. Don't, like,
Yeah.
we're still in.
Yeah.
That's going to have to happen anyway, though.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it's not going to last forever.
Right. But I'm saying let's start it now. Like, we still have other things that we use petroleum products for.
Yeah.
It's not just gas.
Yeah.
We're gonna,
Polymers.
exactly. So let's get back to electric cars, because I've heard a lot of talk about, especially this week, because I've been paying specific attention knowing we're going to talk about it. There are several other ways of making electric cars more efficient, or cars in general more efficient, that electric cars can benefit from. I was reading just this week about they're finally starting to build cars that drive by wire, so there's no actual physical connection between the steering wheel and the wheels. That's how they've always been done. But like airplanes, for instance, if you've heard of fly-by-wire, that it used to be that when you pressed a pedal in the cockpit, it would literally it would pull on a string, and the rudders on the back of the plane would flex. and now they fly entirely electronically, and cars are starting to do the same thing, which means that you don't need drivetrains, you don't need all this complicated mechanics under the car. And so it makes cars like 25% lighter. And so the first generation, I forget even which car it was, but they were saying in the current generation they left all that stuff in, but it doesn't like it's not really used for like it's primarily an electronic system. But once it becomes sort of a common thing to do, it's going to reduce the weight of cars by a ton, and it's going to make them less dangerous. It'll make them a lot easier to maneuver. They're saying that it's way more responsive when you have an electronic signal as opposed to literally pressing or turning a wheel or pressing on the pedal. And again, I'm really excited about that because in terms of electric cars, they can benefit from any kind of weight reduction in weight that is possible, and they're already more responsive because you don't need to rev an engine. You're just sending electricity directly to the motor. It's going to make them even more responsive. And like electric cars, it used to be that you would have, it was sort of thought of as being almost like a child's car, in that it didn't get good acceleration, you didn't have high top speeds, and now they're saying like on the Tesla website it actually lists their top speeds as though it's a sports car, and like it lists its 0 to 100 time, and it's competitive. Like making cars lighter, reducing the complexity of the electronics and the actual physical components in the car underneath is all only going to make it more likely for people to buy electric cars and to want to buy electric cars.
How reliable is the new electronic systems they're putting in? Because when you press on your brake and you're pushing the brake fluid down and actually engaging the brake pads, there's only so many things that can go wrong. Basically, your brake fluid line cuts. But with an electronic signal, like you can have a lot more potential for, stuff to go wrong just when you integrate more electronics into that kind of thing.
I think, and eventual research will obviously say for sure, but it seems like there's enough human error that sort of electronic failure possibility isn't even worth comparing it to. Like, it's not as big an issue as other inadequacies with driving and with car technology. Not to say, like, obviously there are going to have to be safety standards and all this kind of thing, and there are backup systems that take place. But all that I've read is that it's less complex, it's a lot lighter, and it's a lot safer overall to have electronic systems in place as opposed to the physical drivetrain. So, I mean, not that necessarily makes you feel any better until you see actual statistics on it, but there are so many accidents with cars that, I mean, when you get an electric self-driving car, that's going to be even, like, that's just going to be by far the safest thing on the road, no matter how many times. Like, if your electric car that drives itself has a like tweaking brake failure or whatever, it's still going to be way safer than an electric or like a regular, I guess, car on any other kind of failure. Like, it's smart enough that it's going to make it safer no matter how bad, just because what we're comparing it to is regular cars, which are horribly dangerous.
Is that because of the autonomous part or the electric part?
Well, both. They'll work together. The electric car will have its own limitations programmed into it. And so, like, I think I was reading that the self-driving Google car is diesel.
Really?
I think so. I should check that. That's what I believe I read. But if that became electric, I don't know, I would just buy that immediately, a self-driving electric car, because it wouldn't need, like, all I've been reading is that it wouldn't need to be so big. You could almost have a modular car system. Like, I've been reading, like, you can get 1 or 2 seat cars that would literally almost be like shopping carts. Like, you'd pay and you'd pull one out of the line. Like, it would be small enough that you wouldn't need to um, you wouldn't need to store it in, like, you'd be able to store it in a central place, and you just literally grab one, get in, and plug in where you wanted to go, and it would take you there. And there'd be thousands of them in a city, and like there'd be depots everywhere. It'd be like a bike sharing program, but for
Yeah.
cars, and they would.
Well, that's called car to go. That's what they have
No,
now.
but those are regular cars. Like I'm saying, like you would literally have
Right.
a fleet of mini cars that wouldn't need to, like they'd only need to go 50 kilometers an hour, and they would get you anywhere you need to go in the city really quickly. If you had a membership or whatever, you would drive it home and you would leave it plugged in at home, and then you take it to work and drop it off in the almost like a bin of cars. You just like push it in.
Yeah. The car to go does have that. They just don't have the self-driving part and the electric part.
What do you mean they have that? I've never heard of this.
That's car sharing.
No, but it's kind of it's sort of the next generation of car sharing. Like it's,
Right, for sure. Yeah, but I think they're on a good start with having that the infrastructure in place and the brand recognition and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think once the automation and the electric parts of the car come into that, then they can easily integrate that into their service, I think.
Right, like it would almost be like a system of golf carts.
Yeah.
Have slightly more power.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't need to go really fast if you're driving in the city. You wouldn't need a bunch of trunk space necessarily. There might be like almost like a wagon or a trailer or something that you could hitch on the back as you're getting it.
Yeah.
It'd be like one of those retirement villages with like golf carts just everywhere.
Exactly.
Well, and the car would be able to know which roads to avoid with the higher speed limits, because it wouldn't go on like the Trans-Canada or Deerfoot or that kind of thing, because you'd have the maps integrated into there and say, oh, I can't go that fast.
Right.
If we want to do a translation real time for Eastern people, we would say like it wouldn't go on the 401 or.
Well, don't you guys have the Trans-Canada?
We do, but it's not it's not used nearly as much.
Oh, okay.
Isn't the 401 part of the Trans-Canada?
No.
I thought. Oh, is it the 417 that's the Trans-Canada?
The 417 turns into the 17, and the 17 is part of the Trans-Canada.
That's what it is.
But the 400 series isn't.
This is interesting. I really think it's diesel. What, like, do you not think it's diesel? I'm trying to figure out what would the problem with diesel be? Diesel's technically better than.
Yeah, it's supposed to be cleaner, better mileage.
Ooh, it does. What?
Oh, I was just gonna mention that I was in a taxi the other day, and it was a Prius. I don't know if you guys have ever been in a hybrid Prius before, but it's kind of cool. It has like its little not a heads-up display, but a little dashboard, and it shows what type of power it's using. So it will show like a little like battery part here, and then an engine here, and then it will have like arrows going to and from the battery and the engine, depending on if you're using battery power. And then when you're braking, it'll have arrows going towards the battery, saying that it's recharging the battery. And then depending on how fast or acceleration, it will have the arrows going from the engine to the drive to the axle, and then the battery going that way. And it's kind of cool just seeing how the computer just decides which power source to use depending on how much acceleration you need and that kind of thing.
Right.
I have seen that. It's really neat.
Yeah.
So I'm reading, and apparently they're actually electric.
Oh, there you go. Your dreams come true, Rob.
Which
already.
Is fantastic, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the video they made to promote it.
You can show
But
us.
yeah, definitely. It's like getting on a bus that goes exactly where you need to go.
Yeah.
You get in and you sit down and it goes.
Do you have the video right now?
Well, I can't. I mean, I could try to play it here, but it wouldn't work well.
No.
Do you want to try?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, we'll try. It's gonna fail.
Positive attitude, Rob.
No.
Love hearing it from you.
Is there no like YouTube plugin for Hangout?
YouTube plugin. We can watch it, but people on the thing won't be able to see it.
Oh, how come?
That's just how it works. We'll try. Here we go. Are you ready?
Okay, let's see it.
I've never done this before.
Phrasing.
Uh,
Can you even hear it?
yeah.
Quiet.
today we have something extra special for you guys.
It's gonna be
and you guys will be some of
choppy.
the first people outside of our team and outside of Google to ever drive in it.
Isn't that cute?
I really like it. I mean, let's be honest here. That's a cute car.
Adorable.
And I like that it only has 2 seats. Like, if you had a modular car, you wouldn't all need to drive in the same car. You could take like 3, or you could take a fleet of cars if you had a big group of people.
There's no trunk space.
For us to go and
That's a blind guy.
purpose-built vehicles for this. And really, they're prototype vehicles.
Like, a blind guy
They were a
can
chance
drive
for
a
us
car.
to
He can go
explore
places he needs
what
to go.
it would mean.
I just love that idea.
But in the small amount of time we've been working on it, we have functional prototypes. That's exciting.
Oh, it's really
A little kid who's
cool.
too young to
It's
drive?
Really kind of a space
Oh, no, she's blind too.
experience. We're like,
Even, like,
you said
I don't think it would ever get old. This would always be exciting. Every time you got in it, it would just be so fun.
It actually rides better than my own car. Yes.
What she really liked was that it slowed down before it went around a curve, and then accelerated
You know what I think?
in the curve. She's always
One of the
trying to
best
get
things
me to
about
do it
these
that way.
kinds of
That's
cars
what I learned in high school.
is that, like, they were talking about their new algorithms and saying that, like, a bike, they showed a demonstration of a bike coming out into the lane in front of it, and it would automatically slow down, and then the bike would sort of move off to the side, and it would start to speed up, and then it would come back, and, like, that would frustrate a driver so much, but the car doesn't care. The car just doesn't, it's not going to cause an accident.
Impressive. I'm totally in love with this whole concept.
And, yeah, so I really,
Lives are made up of lots and lots of little
this
things.
blind guy, this is enough of this video.
How those
You get the point. The blind guy loves it.
There's this blind guy. There's this blind guy. There's this old guy. There's a blind guy and an old guy. There's an old blind guy.
There were young, there were kids too.
There's a blind child. There's a blind child too.
No, there was a regular
Children, blind children, old blind children.
These are people that have never been able to drive, and now they can.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if they were selling one of those, I would pay so much money for it, even though I'd probably have to design the map for Ottawa myself in order to actually drive it. It would just be so fun.
Yeah.
And
Even
it's only slightly smaller than the car to go in Calgary.
Yeah.
did you just read that, or do you know? Or
Just
did
by
you,
looking
No,
at it.
like the car to goes are like minis or something.
Yeah,
Did you-
no, there's smart. Are these? No, I think they're smart cars.
Oh, okay, so even
Yeah,
smaller
they're
than a
smart
mini.
cars.
Okay.
I want Ottawa to have these now.
You guys don't have car to goes?
No.
No.
There's some car sharing program
There
there.
are car sharing programs for sure. There's like Virtue Car, I think, is the one that I've seen.
It's more or less the same thing as I understand it. I could be
Okay.
wrong.
Are those smart cars too?
No.
No, they're slightly bigger.
84 miles on a full charge. Huh.
I like the little gleam in your eye as you read that, Rob. 84 miles. in a
I said,
single
where
charge.
where could I go with 84 miles?
Wow.
Where? I could go anywhere and back.
Unless it was like Belleville. Or London.
Yeah. Austin, Calgary, Montreal has them, but not Ottawa. What's this?
Montreal is a little bit bigger than Ottawa.
A little.
Montreal and Toronto are also the cities that have Tesla dealerships in Canada. And, yeah, we don't have them. I want one. I want to just go. I want to take a test drive. I want to go through the whole rigmarole of trying to buy a Tesla. I don't even care if I actually get one of the others. I want to try. Sorry?
I was in a Tesla dealership once. It was in Miami.
Did it change your life? That's what I need to know.
I bought a mug.
I didn't even say I bought a Tesla.
I also like admittedly I wasn't familiar with the frunk concept, and the salespeople just didn't think I was going to buy a car apparently. So I was just like, why is there no engine? Like, did they just take it out for the display model? Like, what a strange thing to do.
Did you say this out loud, or did you just think it?
I thought it.
Okay.
So they didn't look like a complete non-familiar person.
Yeah, no, I thought it was just like a really weird display model.
Yeah.
I should have known better, like, given what I know about these things, but
I want to specifically, I know you guys have both seen it, but I want to specifically direct anybody still watching.
Still watching.
No, that's not right.
Rob's mom, this is for you.
To go and read what the Oatmeal wrote about the Tesla, because man, he makes it sound so good, and he has no stake in Tesla motors or electric cars. It's just, you should go read it. Theoatmeal.com. It'll be right there.
It'll be in the show. It'll be in the show notes as well.
I assume you guys both went through the whole thing, because how could you not once you opened it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even the fact that it would just, it has a literal computer in the dashboard, and it runs silently. When you get close to it, it just starts running. Like, you sit down and it's already running and you don't hear it. That's fantastic to me. I was reading when I was on the site, there are all these extras you can get, but the things that are built in are like when you have the charging station in your garage, you can grab the little charging nozzle, walk up to the back of the car where it is, and the port is hidden inside the headlight. Like, there's a little window that opens up as you approach with the nozzle, and it just opens and you plug it in. It's fantastic.
That does sound amazing.
The doorknobs are flush against the thing until you approach them with your hand, and then they pop out. Like, oh man, they thought of everything, and it's like a spaceship that doesn't take off.
Wow.
I guess now that you bring up the cool factor, do you think that that's gonna be that will be maintained and be enough to sell those kinds of cars, or do you think eventually it'll just be another car?
I think so. I think that there's enough pros about, not like electric cars have a lot of pros, but this particular electric car has so many pros that it's literally turning over decades old legislation about selling electric cars in the States. And the States tends to be, especially with things like cars where there are just millions of them there, they tend to be sort of testing grounds for how legislation and politics are going to work around a certain topic. Like, I'm just going to start quoting this story. It was given a 5.4 out of 5-star safety rating. Like, that's obviously it's the highest safety rating ever given because it's
more than the number of stars.
Yeah. Like, they're saying because it has no engine, the entire front of the car can just crumple in to protect you from injury, and it has a low center of energy, or a low center of gravity, because the battery packs are underneath. When they did a rollover test, it broke the machine that was supposed to break the car. Like, it's fantastic. Someone crashed into a concrete wall at 110 miles an hour and walked away because they were in this car. Like, it's incredible. I literally.
What about there was the one fire or something like that, and then, like, that day they figured out what the problem was, and then they automatically updated every Tesla on the road
wirelessly, yeah.
to, like, move. What was it, like? Move up or down just slightly, and the problem was fixed for every Tesla in existence.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, that's why they have 5.4 stars out of 5.
Yeah. Well, the idea here is that they're saying that there are fires, and obviously when a new car or a new technology or something comes out, when it catches fire, that makes the news, no matter what. And so they said there were 3 Teslas that caught on fire. Everyone was like, oh no, they're so unsafe, but there's literally like 5 times more gas cars that catch on fire all the time.
But they don't make the news.
Right, because it's just a car on a fire. Like,
Right?
if you watch a movie, cars catch fire all the time.
Do you remember the Canyonero song from The Simpsons?
Yeah, yeah.
Top of the line in utility sports. Unexplained fires are a matter for the courts. Can you row? Unexplained fires. They're a gas engine thing.
Yeah, it's anyways, I mean, is there anything else you wanted to say about the cool part? Because there's so much you could say. It has a smartphone app that connects to the car. Like the car has a literal computer, so everything you could possibly change on the car can be controlled remotely. Like you can see how close it is to being charged remotely. You can see what your remaining range is on your phone. Like it's unbelievable. I just want it so badly.
It's everything I didn't know that I wanted, but suddenly need.
Yeah. Well, no, I always knew.
I would not. I don't know. If you'd asked me, when did smartphones come out? I want to say 10 years ago, but I think that might be.
That's a stretch.
If you told me like 20 years ago that you could have an electric car, there would just be a supercomputer equivalent in your pocket. It would remotely check the range of a car. You just. I would be like, okay, Mr. Science Man.
None of that is even remotely possible 20 years ago. Now it's not common, but it's definitely something that's within the realm of
where does the car hook to a phone line so you can communicate with it remotely?
Speaking of which, I'm rewatching Seinfeld, and watching them get cell phone and then car phone technology is it's so fun to watch. It somehow stays relevant and yet dates itself at the same time.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So I guess we'll talk. The last thing, we'll just go a bit into the future. Mike, you had a story you wanted to bring up about. I'm not going to talk about your other story, but let's talk about the bad.
Oh no, I don't know. They have everyone's talking about range anxiety and that kind of thing. But they are making advancements in the kind of range that you can get. And so this specific one that they demoed, they drove 1,800 kilometers from Toronto to Halifax without having to stop for a recharge. That's the technology they're looking at, is being able to do that. And so they've demoed that kind of range being possible. And I think that's.
Good God, really?
Well, they didn't actually drive that far.
No, but from Toronto to Halifax?
Yeah.
Jesus.
So that's the future of the range, I guess, of electric cars.
Right.
And I think going back to how much do you actually realistically need, I think for the amount of times that I'm going to go on a road trip that's going to require longer than 300 kilometers, I'll probably be okay renting a car, like a gas car, that will take me there, and for the rest of the time I'll just use my electric car. Not that I have one right now, but if I did, then it's kind of the same thing. We've talked about getting a van. It's like, well, how many times do we actually need the space that a van offers other than moving? So it's like, for that we'll just rent a truck. So you don't it's not worth getting something that you're not going to need on a daily basis, kind of thing, right? So but I think just the fact that they're looking at extending that range of electric cars to make it more palpable for the public to buy into, then I think that's promising.
Because I mean, you'd only need what, 10 hours, 12 hours of straight driving in order to make any argument about battery irrelevant, or at least almost any argument about battery, like range anxiety relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Because eventually humans are going to have to stop driving long before the battery's going to run out.
Yeah, I get tired enough driving 45 minutes home, at the end of a long day. I'm not worried about being able to drive 6 hours in a row.
Right, exactly. And at the end of the day, you can always plug into an outlet, and then it'll charge up by the time you're ready to go again. I don't know. There's so many arguments. People are saying, and I guess we'll end on this. Battery technology is sort of the last thing that needs to have this huge advance. If battery power gets, say, 10 times better in the next 5 years, we're gonna see this huge, like what we've been doing so far hasn't been really getting battery technology better, it's been getting computers more energy efficient. If we can get a jump in battery technology, suddenly all kinds of things we can't even think of right now are going to become possible. You'll be able to run, suddenly solar power can take over because we will have battery capacity to be able to store way more energy, whereas right now, for instance, gas, or not gas, when you burn coal or when you burn whatever fuel source you have, you can't store this stuff for very long. So when you I'm explaining this badly, but when either natural gas companies or whatever burn stuff for electricity, they have to waste most of what the electricity they're generating because we can't store it. We don't have either capacitors or batteries or anything that have enough capacity to store as much as we use. And so if you had batteries that could, say, store 10 times more energy, or if you had capacitors that could store lots of energy, suddenly an electric car becomes a laugh. Like, there's no worries about range because you can get 10 times the range with like a very minimal effort. And it's sort of inevitable. Like, it's a matter of when we get to this technology, because we're unlocking sort of the inside workings of the atom, and really it is a matter of time until we start being able to take advantage of those kinds of things. Like the amount of energy that's stored in 10 grams of matter is just ridiculous. Like, it's enough to power a small city for whatever amount of time. I'd have to go do the math if I wanted to actually give you a number there, but
MC squared.
well, I know I'm not going to go calculating MC squared, but the example that I've heard is that 100 grams of material is more than, I think, every nuclear device we've ever exploded. And
if you could unlock all that energy.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so even if we don't unlock all the energy, if we could unlock like 1%, we'd be set. We wouldn't need any alternative fuel sources. We wouldn't need non-renewable. We would just be able to use that magical device, the Mr. Fusion from Back to the Future, and we would be fine. We could power cars on garbage. And I think it's just a matter of time until we get there. We're obviously not there yet, but I think within the next 10 years, as we start getting towards like the singularity with computers and artificial intelligence, how can somebody not at least make a breakthrough to get battery technology to be better? These are the kinds of things I think about in the future of.
The only problem with like the future of battery technology in that sense is that right now we're working with, or at least my understanding is we're trying to work with lithium-ion batteries and like carbon nanotubes to try and, like, in terms of channels and transfer and stuff like that. And I mean, what element are you going to use as a charge, like a charge currency that's smaller and lighter than lithium?
Well, electrons. Protons. There's got to be.
I think you're talking about hydrogen ions.
Yes, I am. Why? The energy density is.
Protons.
It's.
They would, and even at that point, it would only be like a third of the weight of lithium. Or, nope, a sixth. That is impressive.
I mean, obviously, I'm not well versed enough. I think, Nick, you probably are well versed enough to give us an advanced discussion on battery technology and how you could use protons to create an alternative, better battery.
Nope.
I would like that on my desk Monday.
I don't know, fuel cells, man.
Well, I agree. And fuel cells, I mean, even in terms of spaceflight, you can think of ion generation and ion thrusters as a sort of fuel cell, like something that doesn't need to carry around its fuel, that can get its fuel from the environment as it's going, would be another huge advance that wouldn't necessarily require big batteries. They would just require
I think we have a slightly different understanding of the word fuel cells. Or the
No,
concept of fuel
you're
cells.
you're using fuel cells in a very specific chemistry way, and I'm thinking more.
No, that's what fuel cells are, Rob.
No. Like when we're talking about a fuel cell, if you had a fuel cell in a car, it would suck in oxygen and it would release water or whatever it is. It's a fuel
After
cell.
burning the hydrogen or whatever else it's carrying with it as a fuel.
But there are at least theoretical technologies that don't require a literal fuel on board. Like when you're talking about ion thrusters, there are things there
Okay.
that would be, at least to me, maybe not technically, but that to me is still a fuel cell. It's just not.
No, it's not. It's
So
not
you're gonna-
technically a fuel cell.
Are we gonna put ion thrusters on our electric cars now?
I think that'd be cool.
There's way too much drag from the air, though.
No, but is that you'd have a hood that would suck in.
And everyone behind the ion thruster, it's just like a huge cancer gun.
They wouldn't. You wouldn't accelerate them out the back. Like, when they were.
Can I just poo-poo any more of your dreams, Rob? Just bring them up one by one.
The future is murky. I'm not an advanced electrochemist like Nick. I want there to be. I don't think if you're shooting ions at the back of an exhaust pipe, I don't think you're gonna get damaged by that. Like it's gonna hit the air and stop long before. You're not shooting out gamma rays.
I don't know. Like, don't usual ion thrusters work off like xenon?
Well, you wouldn't use a usual one. You would use a new one that's safe. Xenon.
How many ions would you have to eject from like a car to move a car on the Earth, though? Like it works because it's in space.
I know. No. That's a totally different. You're right. That's a totally different thing. When I was talking about ion thrusters, I was thinking about space travel. You're
Okay,
right.
so you want a Mr. Fusion in an electric car is what you want.
I do. I mean, it wouldn't be an
I
electric
think we would all
car.
like that.
It would be a nuclear car is what it would be. And yes, that's exactly what I want.
Yeah.
For articulating that, I want a nuclear car.
And see,
Your
that's why.
exhaust would be like helium, or if you had a really good one, I guess like iron, maybe?
See, that's why we're
like-
having this show is Future Tech Chat, or Future SCI Chat in this case.
Wait, honey, I gotta pull over and empty out the iron from the back. Damn, most stable nuclear isotope there is.
You could just plop. You would just plop out in a little ball every few miles. The road surface would be curved slightly, so they would all roll to the side together. I want that now. Now I will
I
not
think we all want that, Rob.
get a nuclear car that poops iron.
It'd be like Nibbler from Futurama.
Yeah. I don't watch Futurama, but I accept that analogy.
It's like plops out a really heavy ball of excrement every once in a while.
I think we all want that.
Yep. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end it. I think we've gone far enough into the future that we can say that we successfully finished the first episode of Future SCI Chat.
Yay!
And I look forward to many, many more and talking about technologies that are and are not feasible for the future of everything.
Sounds great.
All right. As always, it was excellent talking to you guys.
And to you.
All mine.
All right. See you next week. Bye.
Hey guys.
Toodaloo.